Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. Today, we're going to be looking at a book that I think is on the bookshelf of pretty much everyone who's ever even thought about trying to make money in the
Oh
markets.
yeah, Market Wizards.
Market Wizards by Jack Schwager.
Wow.
What a classic. And for this deep dive, what we really want to get at is, the real secret sauce. What is it that makes these traders tick? What sets them apart from, the rest of us who maybe have tried and failed?
Well, what's really interesting about the book is that, it's not about giving you some kind of magic formula.
Right.
It's really more about trying to understand the principles behind market success
Okay.
by telling the stories of all these wizards, as Schwager calls them.
Right.
And these are traders from all different kinds of markets,
Right.
like futures, currencies, stocks, but they've all kind of achieved these extraordinary results.
I'm curious about this whole efficient market hypothesis thing, though. Doesn't that kind of shoot down the whole premise of market wizards in the first place?
Yeah, you would think so, right?
Yeah.
Because, I mean, the idea is that all information is already priced into the market.
Right.
So no one can really consistently outperform it. At least that's the theory.
Right.
But then you have a guy like Schwager himself who started out as a believer in this theory
Okay.
and then, had some success as a trader
Uh-huh.
and even poses this question in the book. He's like, if the markets are efficient, how come I'm making so much money?
Uh-huh. I love that. So does the book kind of debunk the efficient market hypothesis then?
Well, I think it certainly throws a wrench into that whole idea.
Yeah.
I mean, by showing that these wizards are able to achieve success consistently over time,
Right.
it does suggest that maybe there's something more to it than just, random chance.
But couldn't it just be that they're all incredibly lucky?
Well, that's where things get even more fascinating. One of the things that really stood out to me was how much emphasis was placed on the mental game.
Okay.
Take, for example, Ed Seykota,
Mm-hmm.
one of the traders featured in the book.
Mm.
He talks about how, early on in his career, he was doing really well trading soybeans.
Okay.
But he found himself getting, like, strangely happy when his mentor was losing money.
Oh, wow.
And he realized that, that kind of competitive mindset wasn't really healthy for him.
Wow. That's not exactly the cutthroat trader image you might imagine, right?
Yeah, not exactly. So he actually made a pretty big shift in his career. He left that strategy behind.
Really? What did he do? Go hide in a monastery and meditate or something?
Not quite.
Uh,
He actually became a floor trader on the New York Cotton Exchange,
oh, wow.
which is really interesting because he realized that, to be successful, he needed an environment that would foster the right kind of mindset.
That's fascinating. It makes you think about how many decisions we make in life that are driven by ego, even when logic tells us otherwise.
Yeah, it's a really good point. I wonder how that plays out in the markets. I mean,
Really?
this focus on self-awareness is something that comes up again and again throughout the book.
So these wizards actually spend time reflecting on their own psychology and how that might be affecting their trading.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Yeah.
So it's really not just about, having some kind of secret formula.
Right. What's fascinating, though, is that they all have completely different approaches. I
Right.
mean, some of them, they're glued to their charts all day. Some of them are poring over, economic data.
Yeah.
Some hold trades for years. Some hold them for minutes.
Okay.
But what they all seem to have in common is this mastery of this kind of internal game,
Right.
disciplined risk management, the
Yeah.
ability to think independently.
It's like they're all speaking different languages, but they're all fluent in the language of self-awareness or something.
Exactly.
Eh.
And I think that's a crucial lesson for anyone, not just traders. I mean, understanding yourself, your strengths, your weaknesses, your biases can actually be way more valuable than, any technical skill.
Yeah, for sure. So let's talk about these different approaches a little more, because it's interesting that there doesn't seem to be like one right way to trade. Is that really true?
Yeah, it seems to be.
Yeah.
I mean, take someone like Marty Schwartz, for instance.
Okay.
He's all about technical analysis.
Okay.
Spends countless hours analyzing charts.
Okay.
Doesn't trust anyone else's opinions. Even says more money is lost listening to brokers than any other way.
Uh-huh. So I shouldn't trust my financial advisor. I'm just kidding.
Huh?
But seriously, though, are you saying there's no place for, taking advice in the market?
Well, not necessarily. It's more about taking ownership of your own decisions, right? You have to do your own homework, understand the risk involved, and not just blindly follow someone else's lead.
Huh?
And then on the other end of the spectrum, you have someone like Jim Rogers,
Right.
who's, focused on these kind of macro trends and
Hmm.
holds positions for years.
Years. Wow.
It's a completely different style, but it just goes to show that, there are many paths to success.
So what makes a Jim Rogers type trader different from, a Marty Schwartz type? Is it all personality?
Well, personality definitely plays a role, but I also think it comes down to their individual understanding of the market.
Okay.
Rogers, for example, believes in identifying these major economic shifts
Hmm.
and then kind of riding them out, whereas Schwartz is all about, technical patterns and these short-term market dynamics.
Interesting. So two completely different approaches.
And then you have someone like Mark Ritchie, who's a scalp trader in the bond market.
Okay.
He's all about speed and precision,
Mm.
making these split-second decisions based on tiny little fluctuations in price.
Wow. So we have like a long-term strategist, a technical analyst, and a lightning-fast scalper, all achieving success in their own ways.
Exactly.
It really does seem like the key is finding an approach that resonates with you and not trying to fit yourself into, someone else's mold.
I think that's right.
But with such diverse approaches, there has to be some common ground, right? Some kind of unifying factor that goes beyond just making money.
You're absolutely right. And the biggest one, maybe even bigger than, their individual strategies, is their focus on risk management.
Ah, so it's not just about winning, it's about not losing.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that losses are inevitable. And what separates the successful traders is how they handle those losses.
Okay.
They all seem to have these rules almost like mantras that they live by.
Yeah.
Like Ed Seykota has this rule, don't ever average losers.
Meaning like don't throw good money after bad.
Yeah. Just accept the loss and move on. Don't get emotionally attached to a losing position.
Makes sense.
Yeah. And then another great example is Bruce Kovner's rule. Always think of your entry point as last night's close.
I don't know if I follow that one.
What he's saying is that, you shouldn't get anchored to the price that you paid for a position.
Okay.
You should always evaluate it based on the current market conditions as if you had just entered the trade.
So you're constantly reassessing, staying adaptable, and not letting those past decisions kind of cloud your judgment.
Mm.
That sounds like good advice even outside of trading, don't you think?
Absolutely. And then there's Martin Schwartz, who talks about knowing your uncle point.
Uncle point.
He's talking about basically defining your pain threshold, knowing exactly how much you're willing to lose before you get out of a trade, no matter what.
So knowing when to walk away, when to cut your losses.
Yeah.
That seems like a really crucial concept. Again, not just for trading, but for any kind of decision making where there's risk involved.
Yeah. It's about setting boundaries, protecting yourself from those catastrophic losses, and knowing when to fold them.
Yeah. So even if our listeners aren't, day trading oil futures, these principles of discipline and risk management, could really be applied to so many areas of life. It's about being aware of your risk tolerance, setting limits, and sticking to them.
Precisely. It's a mindset that I think can benefit anyone in any field.
I like that.
Yeah.
A good place to start.
Yeah.
It's interesting, you start to see this pattern emerge, right? Where these wizards aren't just, technical experts. They're almost like masters of their own psychology.
It's true. And speaking of mindset, there's another concept from the book that I think is particularly relevant for you, given, your love of learning and kind of exploring new ideas. It's Michael Steinhardt's idea of variant perception.
Ooh, variant perception.
Okay, you got my attention. What is that?
So it's the ability to see things differently from the market consensus, to identify opportunities where you believe the crowd is wrong.
Okay, so it's not just about being contrarian,
Yeah.
just for the sake of it.
Right, exactly. It's
Yeah.
about having a well-reasoned, independent view backed
Mhm.
by, your own analysis and understanding.
Okay.
And Steinhardt actually gives this great example in the book. He shorted tobacco stocks based on his variant perception of a legal case involving the industry.
Okay, so walk me through that.
Huh.
What made his perception variant in this case?
Well, the market generally thought that the case was going to be slightly positive for the tobacco companies.
But Steinhardt believed that any legal setback, even a small one, would actually be perceived negatively by the market, regardless of the technical outcome.
So he was betting on the market's emotional reaction, not just the legal outcome itself.
Exactly. And it paid off. The companies technically won a partial victory, but the stock still dropped, and Steinhardt profited from his contrarian view.
Oh, wow. That's a great example of how, understanding human psychology, how people react to news and events can be just as important as, analyzing the hard data.
Absolutely. And this whole concept of variant perception really resonated with me.
Yeah.
It's about thinking for yourself, challenging assumptions, not being afraid to go against the grain.
It's funny. I've always considered myself to be like a contrarian thinker,
Hmm.
but this is different. This isn't just about disagreeing. It's about having a well-informed, independent perspective.
Exactly. It's about doing your own research, forming your own conclusion, and then being willing to stand by them even when everyone else is telling you you're wrong.
Right. That takes some guts. I mean, thinking about some recent decisions I've made, I wonder if I could have applied this principle of variant perception. How do you know, though, if your variant view is just plain wrong?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? I mean, there's no guaranteed formula,
Yeah.
but I think the key is having conviction in your analysis, being aware of the risks, and being willing to adjust your view
Yeah.
if new information emerges.
So it's this constant balancing act between conviction and flexibility.
Exactly. You have to be confident enough to, act on your beliefs, but humble enough to admit when you're wrong.
So we've talked about psychology, we've talked about risk management, and now this idea of variant perception. It seems like these wizards just have a different way of looking at the world, a different way of thinking.
They do.
Yeah.
And while their specific strategies might differ, you know, these underlying principles are really what sets them apart.
It's funny, when you first told me you're reading Market Wizards, I pictured you with a crystal ball, trying to predict the future.
I wish it were that easy.
But what's fascinating is that this isn't just a book about trading. It's a book about human psychology, about understanding how our minds work and how we make decisions, under pressure.
You're exactly right.
Right.
And I think those lessons are applicable to so many areas of life,
Oh.
business relationships, personal growth.
For sure. So what are some of the big takeaways for our listeners, many of whom might not be traders themselves? What can they learn from these wizards that they can apply to their own lives?
Well, I think the most important lesson is that success in any field often comes down to a combination of factors, right?
Yeah.
Hard work, discipline, continuous learning, and a willingness to adapt and evolve. I mean, these wizards, they're constantly studying, they're refining their strategies, challenging their own assumptions. They're not afraid to make mistakes, but they learn from them and they move on.
Okay.
They're incredibly self-aware. They understand their strengths and weaknesses, their risk tolerance, and they're not driven by ego or the need to be right all the time. And then they're masters of risk management. They have systems in place to protect themselves from, those catastrophic losses.
Right. It's like they're all playing a different game, but they're all playing it at like a master level or something.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
And even if you're not trading stocks, I mean, the principles of discipline, risk management, and self-awareness are applicable to investing your money, starting a business, or, frankly, any important decision in life.
Yeah. It's about being intentional about your choices, understanding the risks and rewards and making choices that are aligned with your goals and values.
Exactly. It's about taking ownership of your decisions and not being afraid to think differently.
Okay, that makes sense. So it's not just about becoming a master trader. It's about becoming a master decision maker.
I think that's a great way to put it. And here's a final thought for our listeners to ponder. Could it be that the real secret to market success, and perhaps success in many other endeavors, lies not just in, analyzing external factors, but in mastering one's own mind?
Ooh, that's deep. Are you saying these wizards are basically Jedi masters of the market, using the Force to make millions?
Haha. Maybe not Jedi Masters, but they certainly seem to have a heightened awareness of, their own thoughts and emotions and how those influence their decisions.
So it's not just about being smart, it's about being self-aware, about understanding your own biases, your own tendencies, and how those might be affecting your choices.
Exactly. And that's a skill that can be developed just like any other skill. It takes practice, it takes reflection, and it takes a willingness to challenge your own assumptions.
So Market Wizards isn't just a guide to trading, it's almost like a guide to self-mastery.
I think that's a brilliant insight. And it's a journey that's available to all of us, whether we're trading stocks, building businesses, or simply trying to navigate the complexities of life.
It's amazing to me that a book about, Wall Street could have such profound implications for personal growth.
It really is. It just goes to show you that the most valuable lessons often transcend specific fields. These principles of self-awareness, discipline, and risk management, they're really applicable to any pursuit where decisions have to be made under uncertainty.
Right. I mean, we're talking about things that are applicable across all kinds of different, areas of life.
Exactly.
I'm also struck by the fact that Market Wizards doesn't try to offer some kind of one-size-fits-all approach to trading.
Right.
It's really more about understanding those core principles and then finding your own path,
Yeah.
your own style.
It's about the journey, isn't it?
Yeah. Find what works for you.
Yeah, and I think that's a really powerful message for anyone who's feeling lost, or overwhelmed.
Right.
It's not about finding the quote-unquote right answer. It's
Mm.
about finding your answer.
I like that.
Well,
So for our listeners who are inspired to dive deeper into market wizards, what would you say is the most important thing to keep in mind?
I would encourage them to approach the book not just as a guide to trading, but as a study in human behavior.
Oh,
Pay attention to how these wizards think, how they manage their emotions, how they approach risk. I mean, those are the real gems that you can apply to any aspect of life.
yeah. And remember, it's not about trying to replicate their exact strategies. It's
Right.
about understanding those underlying principles
Mhm.
and then adapting them to your own, unique circumstances.
Exactly. Learn from their successes, but also, their mistakes, because even wizards make mistakes.
Right.
What sets them apart is their ability to learn from those mistakes and come back stronger.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I'm left with this sense of possibility. Like anyone can achieve extraordinary results if they're willing to put in the work, develop the right mindset and embrace those principles that we've been talking about today.
I love that. I think that's a really beautiful takeaway.
Yeah.
It's a reminder that success isn't just reserved for a select few.
Mm.
It's available to anyone who's willing to embrace the journey of self-discovery and mastery.
Well said. And with that, I want to thank you, our listeners, for joining us on this deep dive into the world of market wizards.
Yeah, thanks for listening, everyone.
We hope you learned some valuable insights today that you can apply to your own lives, your own pursuits, and your own journey to becoming the best version of yourself.
Until next time, happy exploring. Still